Well, here we are, Saturday, December 17th, 2022. I'm Larissa, and we are reading Kurt Vonnegut's Breakfast of Champions. Feeling festive today. Christmassy festive. Anyway. Here we go. We're going to do more than 2 chapters because the next few chapters are real short, so I might do 4 chapters today, we'll see. Breakfast of Champions by Mr. Kurt Vonnegut. Chapter 6. Dwayne Hoover sat in the used Plymouth Fury in his own vacant lot for an hour, listening to West Virginia. He was told about health insurance for pennies a day, about how to get better performance from his car. He was told what to do about constipation. He was offered a Bible, which had everything that God or Jesus had actually said out loud, printed in red capital letters. He was offered a plant, which would attract and eat disease-carrying insects in his home. All this was stored away in Dwayne's memory in case he should need it later on. He had all kinds of stuff in there. While Dwayne sat there so alone, the oldest inhabitant of Midland City was dying in the county hospital at the foot of Fairchild Boulevard, which was 9 miles away. She was Mary Young. She was 108 years old. She was black. Mary Young's parents had been human slaves in Kentucky. There was a funny connection between Mary Young and Dwayne Hoover. She did the laundry for Dwayne Hoover's family for a few months back when Dwayne was a little boy. She told Bible stories and stories about slavery to little Dwayne. She told him about a public hanging of a white man she had seen in Cincinnati when she was a little girl. A black intern at the county hospital now watched Mary Young die of pneumonia. The intern did not know her. He had been in Midland City for only a week. He wasn't even a fellow American, although he had taken his medical degree at Harvard. He was an Indaro. He was a Nigerian. His name was Cyprian Ukwende. He felt no kinship with Mary or any American blacks. He felt kinship only with Indaros. As she died, Mary was as lone on the planet as were Dwayne Hoover or Kilgore Trout. She had never reproduced. There were no friends or relatives to watch her die, so she spoke her very last words on the planet to Cyprian Ukwende. She did not have enough breath left to make her vocal cords buzz. She could only move her lips noiselessly. Here is all she had to say about death. Oh my, oh my. Like all earthlings at the point of death, Mary Young sent faint reminders of herself to those who had known her. She released a small cloud of telepathic butterflies, and one of these brushed the cheek of Dwayne Hoover 9 miles away. Dwayne heard a tired voice from somewhere behind his head, even though no one was back there. It said this to Dwayne, "Oh my, oh my." Dwayne's bad chemicals now made him put his car in gear. He drove out of the vacant lot, proceeded sedately down Union Avenue, which paralleled the interstate. He went past his principal place of business, which was Dwayne Hoover's Exit 11 Pontiac Village, and he turned into the parking lot of the new Holiday Inn next door. Dwayne owned a third of the inn, in partnership with Midland City's leading orthodontist, Dr. Alfred Maritimo, and Bill Miller, who was chairman of the parole board at the Adult Correctional Institution at Shepherdstown, among other things. Dwayne went up in the inn's back steps to the roof without meeting anybody. There was a full moon. There were 2 full moons. The new Mildred Berry Memorial Center for the Arts was a translucent sphere on stilts, and it was illuminated from the inside now, and it looked like a moon. Dwayne gazed over the sleeping city. He had been born there. He had spent the first 3 years of his life in an orphanage only 2 miles from where he stood, and he had been adopted and educated there. He owned not only the Pontiac Agency and a piece of the new Holiday Inn. He owned 3 burger chefs, too, and 5 coin-operated car washes and pieces of the Sugar Creek Drive-In Theater, radio station WMCY, and 3 Maples Par 3 golf courses, and 1,700 shares of common stock in Barrington Limited, a local electronics firm. He owned dozens of vacant lots. He was on the board of directors of the Midland City National Bank. But now Midland City looked unfamiliar and frightening to Dwayne. "Where am I?" he said. He even forgot that his wife Celia had committed suicide, for instance, by eating Drano, a mixture of sodium hydroxide and aluminum flakes, which was meant to clear drains. Celia became a small volcano, since she was composed of the same sorts of substances which commonly clogged drains. Dwayne even forgot that his only child, a son, had grown up to be a notorious homosexual. His name was George, but everybody called him Bunny. He played piano in the cocktail lounge of the new Holiday Inn. "Where am I?" said Dwayne. Chapter 7. Kilgore Trout took a leak in the men's room of the New York City movie house. There was a sign on the wall next to the roller towel that advertised a massage parlor called the Sultan's Harem. Massage parlors were something new and exciting in New York. Men could go in there and photograph naked women, or they could paint the women's naked bodies with water-soluble paints. Men could be rubbed all over by a woman until their penises squirted jism into Turkish towels. "It's a full life and a merry one," said Kilgore Trout. There was a message written in pencil on the tiles by the roller towel. This was it. What is the purpose of life? Trout plundered into his pockets for a pen or pencil. He had an answer to the question, but he had nothing to write with, not even a burnt match. So he left the question unanswered, but here's what he would have written if he had found anything to write with. To be the eyes and ears and conscience of the creator of the universe, you fool. When Trout headed back for his seat in the theater, he played at being the eyes and ears and conscience of the creator of the universe. He sent messages by telepathy to the creator, wherever he was. He reported that the men's room had been clean as a whistle. "The carpeting under my feet," he signaled from the lobby, "is springy and new. I think it must be some miracle fiber. It's blue. You know what I mean by blue?" And so on. When he got to the auditorium itself, the house lights were on. Nobody was there but the manager, who was also the ticket taker and the bouncer and the janitor. He was sweeping the filth from between the seats. He was a middle-aged white man. "No more fun tonight, grandfather," he said to Trout. "Time to go home." Trout didn't protest. Neither did he leave immediately. He examined a green enamel steel box in the back of the auditorium. It contained the projector and the sound system and the films. There was a wire that led from the box to a plug in the wall. There was a hole in the front of the box. That was how the pictures got out. On the side of the box was a simple switch. It looked like this. It intrigued Trout to know that he had only to flick the switch and the people would start fucking and sucking again. "Good night, grandfather," said the manager pointedly. Trout took his leave of the machine reluctantly. He said this to the manager: "It fills such a need, this machine, and it's so easy to operate." As Trout departed, he sent this telepathic message to the creator of the universe, serving as his eyes and ears and conscience. "I'm headed for 42nd Street now. How much do you already know about 42nd Street?" Chapter 8. Trout wandered out onto the sidewalk of 42nd Street. It was a dangerous place to be. The whole city was dangerous because of chemicals and the uneven distribution of wealth and so on. A lot of people were like Dwayne. They created chemicals in their own bodies, which were bad for their heads. But there were thousands upon thousands of other people in the city who bought bad chemicals and ate them or sniffed them or injected them in their veins with devices which looked like this. Sometimes they even stuffed bad chemicals up their assholes. Their assholes looked like this. People took such awful chances with chemicals and their bodies because they wanted the quality of their lives to improve. They lived in ugly places where there were only ugly things to do. They didn't own doodly squat, so they couldn't improve their surroundings. So they did their best to make their insides beautiful instead. The results had been catastrophic so far. Suicide, theft, murder, and insanity, and so on. But new chemicals were coming onto the market all the time. 20 feet away from Trout, there on 42nd Street, a 14-year-old white boy lay unconscious in a doorway of a pornography store. He had swallowed a half pint of a new type of paint remover, which had gone on sale for the first time only the day before. He had also swallowed 2 pills, which were intended to prevent contagious abortion in cattle, which was called Bang's disease. Trout was petrified there on 42nd Street. It had given him a life not worth living, but I had also given him an iron will to live. This was a common combination on the planet Earth. The theater manager came out and locked the door behind him, and 2 young black prostitutes materialized from nowhere. They asked Trout and the manager if they would like to have some fun. They were cheerful and unafraid because of a tube of Norwegian hemorrhoid remedy which they had eaten about half an hour before. The manufacturer had never intended the stuff to be eaten. People were supposed to squirt it up their assholes. These were country girls. They had grown up in the rural south of the nation, where their ancestors had been used as agricultural machinery. The white farmers down there weren't using machines made out of meat anymore, though, because machines made out of metal were cheaper and more reliable and required simpler homes. So the black machines had to get out of there or starve to death. They came to cities because every place else had signs like this on the fences and trees. "No trespassing. This means you." Kilgore Trout once wrote a story called This Means You. It was set in the Hawaiian Islands, the place where the lucky winners of Dwayne Hoover's contest in Midland City were supposed to go. Every bit of land on the island was owned by only about 40 people, and in the story, Trout had those people decide to exercise their property rights to the full. They put up no trespassing signs on everything. This created terrible problems for the million other people on the islands. The law of gravity required that they stick somewhere on the surface, either that or they could go out into the water and bob offshore. But then the federal government came through with an emergency program. It gave a big balloon full of helium to every man, woman, and child who didn't own property. There was a cable with a harness on it dangling from each balloon. With the help of the balloons, Hawaiians could go on inhabiting the island without always sticking to things other people owned. The prostitutes worked for a pimp now. He was splendid and cruel. He was a god to them. He took their free will away from them, which was perfectly all right. They didn't want it anyway. It was as though they had surrendered themselves to Jesus, for instance, so they could live unselfishly and trustingly, except that they had surrendered to a pimp instead. Their childhoods were over. They were dying now. Earth was a tin horn planet as far as they were concerned. When Trout and the theater manager, two tin horns, said they didn't want any tin horn fun, the dying children sauntered off, their feet sticking to the planet, coming unstuck, then sticking again. They disappeared around a corner. Trout, the eyes and ears of the creator of the universe, sneezed. God bless you, said the manager. This was a fully automatic response many Americans had to hearing a person sneeze. Thank you, said Trout. Thus, a temporary friendship was formed. Trout said he hoped to get safely to a cheap hotel. The manager said he hoped to get to the subway station on Times Square, so they walked together, encouraged by the echoes of their footsteps from the building facades. The manager told Trout a little about what the planet looked like to him. It was a place where he had a wife and 2 kids, he said. They didn't know he ran a theater which showed blue movies. They thought he was doing consulting work as an engineer so late at night. He said that the planet didn't have much use for engineers his age anymore. It had adored them once. Hard times, said Trout. The manager told of being in on the development of a miraculous insulating material which had been used on rocket ships to the moon. This was, in fact, the same material which gave the aluminum siding of Dwayne Hoover's dream house in Midland City its miraculous insulating qualities. The manager reminded Trout of what the first man to set foot on the moon had said, 1 small step for man, 1 great leap for mankind. Thrilling words, said Trout. He looked over his shoulder, perceived that they were being followed by a white Oldsmobile Tornado with a black vinyl roof. This 400 horsepower front-wheel drive vehicle was burbling along at about 3 miles an hour, 10 feet behind them and close to the curb. That was the last thing Trout remembered, seeing the Oldsmobile back there. The next thing he knew, he was on his hands and knees on a handball court underneath the Queensboro Bridge at 59th Street, with the East River nearby. His trousers and underpants were around his ankles. His money was gone. His parcels were scattered around him. The tuxedo, the new shirt, the books, blood seeped from one ear. The police caught him in the act of pulling up his trousers. They dazzled him with a spotlight as he leaned against the backboard of the handball court and fumbled foolishly with his belt and the buttons on his fly. The police supposed that they had caught him committing some public nuisance and had caught him working with an old man's limited pallet of excrement and alcohol. He wasn't quite penniless. There was a $10 bill in the watch pocket of his pants. It was determined at a hospital that Trout was not seriously hurt. He was taken to a police station where he was questioned. All he could say was that he had been kidnapped by pure evil in a white Oldsmobile. The police wanted to know how many people were in the car, their ages, their sexes, the colors of their skins, their manner of speech. For all I know, they may not have even been Earthlings, said Trout. For all I know, that car may have been occupied by an intelligent gas from Pluto. Trout said this so innocently, but his comment turned out to be the first germ in an epidemic of mind poisoning. Here is how the disease was spread. A reporter wrote a story for the New York Post the next day, and he led off with the quotation from Trout. The story appeared under this headline: Pluto bandits kidnap pair. Trout's name was given as Kilmer Trotter, incidentally, address unknown. He was given as age 82. His age was given as 82. Other papers copied the story, rewrote it some. They all hung on to the joke about Pluto, spoke knowingly of the Pluto gang, and reporters asked police for any information on the Pluto gang. So police went looking for information on the Pluto gang. So New Yorkers, who had so many nameless terrors, were easily taught to fear something seemingly specific. The Pluto gang. They bought new locks for their doors and gratings for their windows to keep to keep out the Pluto gang. They stopped going to theaters at night for fear of the Pluto gang. Woo! I think Anthony Fauci read this book. Foreign newspapers spread the terror, ran articles on how persons thinking of visiting New York might keep to a certain few streets in Manhattan and stand a fair chance of avoiding the Pluto gang. In one of New York City's many ghettos for dark-skinned people, a group of Puerto Rican boys gathered together in the basement of an abandoned building. They were small, but they were numerous and volatile. They wished to become frightening in order to defend themselves and their friends and families, something the police wouldn't do. They also wanted to drive the drug peddlers out of the neighborhood and to get enough publicity, which was very important, to catch the attention of the government so that the government would do a better job of picking up the garbage and so on. One of them, Jose Mendoza, was a fairly good painter, so he painted the emblem of their new gang on the backs of the members' jackets. This was it. Pluto Gang! Oh, I want a jacket. Maybe I'll make one. One more chapter. Today. Chapter 9. While Kilgore Trout was inadvertently poisoning the collective mind of New York City, Dwayne Hoover, the demented Pontiac dealer, was coming down from the roof of his own Holiday Inn in the Middle West. Dwayne went into the carpeted lobby of the place not long before sunrise to ask for a room. As queer as the hour was, there was a man ahead of him, and a black one at that. This was Cyprian Ukwande, the Ndaro, the physician from Nigeria, who was staying at the inn until he could find a suitable apartment. Dwayne awaited his turn humbly. He had forgotten he was co-owner of the inn. As for staying at a place where black men stayed, Dwayne was philosophical. He experienced a sort of bittersweet happiness as he told himself, times change. Times change. The night clerk was new. He did not know Dwayne. He had Dwayne fill out a registration in full. Dwayne, for his part, apologized for not knowing what the number of his license plate was. He felt guilty about that, even though he knew he hadn't done anything he should feel guilty about. He was elated when the clerk let him have a room key. He had passed the test, and he adored his room. It was so new and cool and clean. It was so neutral. It was the brother of thousands upon thousands of rooms and Holiday Inns all over the world. Dwayne Hoover might be confused as to what his life was all about, or what he should do with it next, but this much he had done correctly. He had delivered himself to an irreproachable container for a human being. It awaited anybody. It awaited Dwayne. Around the toilet seat was a band of paper like this, which he would have to remove before he used the toilet. Sanitary. This loop of paper guaranteed Dwayne that he need have no fear that corkscrew-shaped little animals would crawl up his asshole and eat up his wiring. That was one less worry for Dwayne. There was a sign hanging on the inside doorknob, which Dwayne now hung on the outside doorknob. It looked like this: please do not disturb. Dwayne pulled open his floor-to-ceiling draperies for a moment. He saw the sign which announced the presence of the inn to weary travelers on the interstate. Here's what it looked like. Holiday Inn, the world's innkeeper. He closed his draperies. He adjusted the heating and ventilating system. He slept like a lamb. A lamb was a young animal which was legendary for sleeping well on planet Earth. It looked like this. Well, that's the end of chapter 9. Oh my God. Mr. Vonnegut. Oh my gosh. You must have been a blast to have a cup of coffee with, huh? Oh my. So very funny. Pluto Gang. Seriously. I might have to make a Pluto Gang jacket. I might have to make a patch. The Pluto Gang. Anyway, I hope you're enjoying the book. I know I am. I don't know, I was thinking next I might read Beloved. There, I was talking about that book and that film with someone recently. The gal who does my eyelashes. Talking about that film. I remember when that film came out. I saw it in the movie theater. I did, and I had read the book. I had read the book. The book is always better. Whenever you see something like the book is always better. Um, but that film followed the book fairly well. And I remember the criticisms that Oprah took at that time, aesthetic criticism on the film. But I still enjoyed it. It's still very good. Still very good. So I might read Beloved next. It's a great ghost story, huh? Mm-hmm. It's a thin line between the living and the dead, isn't it? It's a thin line.